So thank you so much for joining us on YouTube this evening. We're looking forward to a very interesting and important conversation about the value of interfaith dialogue as interdisciplinary engagement that involves an encounter with the religious other. Among other things, we'll be talking about why that's important both on an individual level and for a transformative politics. My name is Drew Kim. I'm the director of the Center for the Advancement of the Humanities. I want to start out by thanking Heather Hathaway, who was the previous director of the center, who helped to get this grant initiated, as well as Pat Kennelly, the Center for Peacemaking, Chris Jeske, the Center for Peacemaking, and Rob Smith, Marquette Center for Urban Research, Teaching, and Outreach. This is a grant that's funded in part from the Wisconsin Humanities with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Wisconsin Humanities strengthens the roots of community life through educational and cultural programs that inspire civic participation and individual imagination. I'm just going to start by saying a little bit about our panel. This is the fourth of 4 panels, so sadly this is our last time together, at least as associated with this particular grant. The original title of this grant was Interfaith Dialogue and Community Engagement Amidst the Pandemic. The goal was to convene humanities experts, religious leaders, and community members to spark conversation about the history and potential of interfaith engagement to promote justice and peace in Milwaukee. The concept is inspired by original Muslim Christian dialogue group that first met in Milwaukee over 4 decades ago. By exploring lessons drawn from the group's historical role, our conversations will allow for reflection about new models of engagement between community and interfaith groups that pursue religious and social commitments during and in the aftermath of COVID-19. This project considers how challenges to communities related to the pandemic have been addressed by interfaith partners and aims to deepen understanding about how communities can promote nonviolence, peacemaking, forgiveness, and justice. So with that said, I'm going to introduce our prestigious panel here. And I'm going to give, since we have so many panelists this time, so I'm going to give somewhat shortened bios, but I encourage all of you watching to view our other 3 panels that we had on our YouTube channel. And if you want to see the extended biographies, those will be present there. So first off, I want to acknowledge Jorge Montiel, who's a graduate student in the philosophy department. He's working on his dissertation right now, and he's been a major part of helping us organize and think through these events. He's been managing all of the logistics, and so we would not have been able to do all of this without Jorge's assistance. Also, so then I'll move on. We have Dr. Irfan Omar, who's an associate professor here at Marquette, and Caitlin Daly, who's a PhD student in Duke University. And it's their text, Interfaith Engagement in Milwaukee, A Brief History of Christian-Muslim Dialogue, which really was the kind of spark and catalyst for us to have these conversations that we're having. Also, we have with us Pardeep Kalika, who's the executive director of the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee. I love listening to Pardeep speak. I've invited him personally to speak in my classes, and was grateful that he accepted the invitation. Janan Najib will be joining us soon. She ran a little bit late tonight, but she's the president of the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition, has also been an invaluable member of our conversations here and conversation partner. And in addition, we're so grateful this evening to have with us 4 undergraduate students who are going to talk to us about the importance of interfaith, teaching interfaith, what it means to teach interfaith, and the value that that can have for individuals and for the community. And those students are Rebecca DeBoer, who's a senior in educational studies and psychology here at Marquette, Fatima Farouk, who's a sophomore in biochemistry and molecular biology here at Marquette, Claire Herrig, who's a senior in data science, and Lauren Harrison, who's a junior in English literature. And then last, but certainly not least, is our moderator for this evening, Rhonda Hill, who is the, what do you want, Rhonda? President, founder of raceandfaith.org. And she will be launching our initial round of questions.
Great, thank you, Andrew, and welcome to everyone who's watching via live stream now, and to all of our panelists. I'm glad to be a part of this conversation and was so honored when Irfan and Andrew asked me, considered me to be moderator for tonight's conversation. And so we want to just jump right in to tonight's questions, and we will ask a series of questions, two being posed by me, the moderator, and then the fun part, our panelists will then share their own questions and ask questions of each other. So I encourage you, as you listen to this dialogue, you may have some things sparked in you that make you want to have some questions as well. Please do share your questions, post them. This is not to say we'll be able to answer them, but we will appreciate them because we can all ponder them together, possibly at a later time. So without further ado, and this is how I want to do this. I'll say, I'm not going to select necessarily who goes when. I'll ask the question. I'll ask one person to answer the question, and then I just would like for folks to hop in after that. If there seems to be a lag and people aren't jumping in, then I'll just prompt that and say, well, who wants to go next? But just to keep it flowing, we don't have a lot of time, right? We're trying to pack in a lot in an hour and a half. So we all know what we came here for. So let's just jump right in and answer the questions. And you'll get 3 minutes to answer this first question. If you seem to go past that 3-minute time, we'll just gently interrupt you and ask you to wrap up. You may get a note in the chat box saying you have 1 minute left or something like that. So please don't take it personally if I have to jump in on you and say, oh, that's great. Can you wrap up? Okay. So for our first question, we want to know from each of our panelists, what is the value of learning about the religious other? What is the value of learning about the religious other? And to start off this question, the first person I will ask is Caitlin Daly. Caitlin, can you please share with us within 3 minutes, what is the value of the religious other, of learning about the religious other?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rhonda. I'm happy to be here with everybody. I think my initial reflections when I was thinking about this question, I went immediately to relationships and deepening relationships with other people that we may not be as familiar with, that may not be in our immediate circles of relationships currently. So I think interfaith dialogue and engagement and learning allow you to expand your sense of familiarity. And so to develop a sense of familiarity with those that you might not currently be familiar with. And I think that is a way, especially to engage different spaces and different people and opportunities that are outside of your comfort zone. So I know that can be often a challenge that prevents people from engaging in interfaith dialogue. But the way in which dialogues and learning spaces are typically arranged, that there are guidelines to help with that, kind of decrease that barrier of perhaps fear or uncertainty about what that's going to look like when you are engaging others who are different than you. But the guidelines that are set up with interfaith engagement usually help facilitate being okay and more comfortable in that space of uncertainty and something that might be not as comfortable. So for me, it's always been deepening relationships through developing a sense of greater familiarity with others.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? I don't want to appoint anybody. Just jump right in.
I can share next. So again, like Caitlin said, it's great to be on a panel with all of you. I think I've heard each of you speak about your experiences in interfaith dialogue throughout the duration of the past few years, and it's been really like eye-opening and exciting. And to kind of answer Rhonda's question, that's exactly it. I think expanding your perspective in terms of faith has been a really cool experience. I learned to realize that faith is such a unique experience to each person. Sure, there are like traditions and practices that are unique and specific to one faith, but the way that one person participates in their faith is different from the person next to them or people across the country and things like that. So I think it really helps to like understand the foundations of each faith in terms of traditions and practices, while learning about how each peer participates in their faith. It's helped me specifically break like different stereotypes or misconceptions that have been introduced in the media and things like that. But then also help me like think more critically on the differences that we each have, as well as the similarities that we all partake in with our faiths.
Thank you. Without putting you on the spot, it's a note that maybe each speaker could name the next speaker. We can try that method if you recognize another name you want to highlight.
Sure. Rebecca, would you like to share next?
I knew it. And yes, I would love to share next. Yeah, my name is Rebecca DeBoer. I think for me, this question, and really, I was really resonating with what you said, Caitlin, because whenever I think about interfaith dialogue, I always think of kind of the statement that the more that I learn about you, the more I learn about me. And when you learn about somebody who's different than you in any type of way, I think that opens up your whole worldview to what is possible, what is out there in the world. And for me, I know as somebody who is like on the individual level, taking that step can be a challenge, and you need to be vulnerable. You need to have humility, because and I even had some incredible conversations this week because I'm in Dr. Omar's class, and we were having conversations with people of different religions and people of different cultures who are different than us. And just from that conversation, even from another experience I had from going to, because I also am Native too, I started going to a congregation of the Great Spirit, and just seeing, like, again, like we've learned in Dr. Omar's class, that there's more than one way of doing something. And it was just very, very wholesome. And then I pick somebody. Let's see. Okay, Lauren, do you want to go?
Yeah, I can go. Kind of going off what everyone said, I think that the biggest thing is interfaith dialogue can help combat ignorance. And I think that since ignorance sometimes leads to stereotypes and negative connotations about a group, I think that just sitting down and being able to learn more about people can help open your eyes and see that stereotypes aren't real and groups of people aren't represented in one way. And I think too, going off of that, I remember Dr. Omar's class, I took it a few years ago, we talked about a lot of the media and how one image is put out, and that's pretty much like a lot of people view that group as that one image. And sitting down and talking to various people from various backgrounds, various religions can really help put an end to that, I think. Dr. Omar, do you want to go?
Yeah, thank you. Let me start the timer here. For me, the value of learning about the religious other is, one thing is that Rebecca said, is it is not possible to know the self without knowing the other. And I also agree with, Claire's point that, faith experience is a unique experience. And, but, the most surprising thing for me was to see in interfaith settings, the surprises that people come up with when they learn about the other. And I remember a few years ago, there was a Catholic student from northern part of Wisconsin, and we were reading Nostra Aetate in our class, and she almost broke down in the class in front of 20 other people, saying that I went to Catholic school all my life and I didn't know that my own religious tradition implores me to see the religious other with respect and even with esteem, because that's the word used in the English translation of that passage in Nostra Aetate. And that shook me because I didn't know that it's going to be impacting people in that way. And I know that there are Muslim students who have shown me a great deal of surprise when they learn about a common word, the document that came out in 2007. And then they read all of these Muslim religious leaders from around the world speaking in unison about the importance of engaging and respecting and collaborating with religious other. So for me, it was learning about the shocking aspects for myself, but also observing in the classroom and among my colleagues these surprising and exclamations of self-discovery. So that is, for me, is the biggest discovery. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to invite another person to speak?
Pradeep, please.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Omar, and thank you, everyone. Yeah, just beautiful. So like a lot of times I bring a notebook because I hear the most, like this, I learn more than I could ever teach in these discussions. And I just love, this, as far as the more that I learn about you, the more that I learn about me and thinking about the religious other. And just I think to me, interfaith dialogue is definitely about learning. It's definitely about experiences, and it's definitely about a process. And I think that this process is continual for us as a Sikh community. Sikh, the word Sikh means learner, and this is lifelong journey of learning about one another. And again, it's this, like, I don't want to take out the process, because sometimes when we jump to the conclusion of it, we don't realize how difficult it was. And then there are those in the world that will learn more about another person and still not have respect for that person and still not have reverence for that person. So I think that says a lot about who they are and how they're feeling. We have sometimes where we work with certain people and they can learn about somebody else's theology only to try to utilize it against them. And, they think about certain ways, and what it comes back to is you're feeling that about yourself. And so you're like, the way that you're viewing the world is being told. And I think, again, this kind of listening to the process is to get us to better listen to pain. And and I think just coming back and then saying, like, if we do listen to that pain and go through that process, hopefully we realize that there never was a religious other. There never was another. And Fatima, did you go yet?
No, I didn't go yet. I wanted to touch on what Dr. Umar said about how he noticed a lot of people, getting surprised and getting emotional about things they found common with people's other faith. And I wanted to talk about my own experience too, about what I found really touching. I grew up in a majority like Muslim place, so interfaith is new to me. And I moved here like 3 years ago and to America, and I started working in retail. And for my whole life, I thought that Fatima was just like a holy Muslim name and like a very important name. And it happened to me like a few times where there were like Catholic people who would tell me that, oh, Fatima, like my name is Fatima too. Are you Catholic? And I would be like, no, I'm Muslim. And then we would share about how the word Fatima or how the name is important to both of us. And for me, that kind of sparked me to learn more about, other people's religions, because I think that being an immigrant to a country where you have to kind of navigate around like new experiences and meeting people of other faith and religion, it sometimes becomes really like you don't sometimes have that platform to build trust and connections. So I think when you talk about interfaith, it helps you build that trust, and it helps you build more friendly ties and helps you relate to other people, especially if you're at a new place. And Janan, yeah.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Really great to be with all of you. I don't want to repeat what's been said. Everything that's been said resonates definitely. I've been involved in interfaith dialogue since I was really a teenager, so everything that's been mentioned is absolutely true. I think for me, what is really important is, in the same way that I want to be able to explain my faith the way I understand it, I recognize that it's important for other people to explain their faith the way they understand it, and not for me to assume things about what they believe and vice versa. And so you need to kind of offer the same respect for others that you want for yourself. For a long time, I was involved in different types of interfaith dialogue, but especially in a Muslim Catholic dialogue. And one of the things that we often said is that the more we learn about each other, the more we become ambassadors for each other within our own faith community. And so people might have certain assumptions about what a Buddhist believes, or what a Catholic believes, or what a Jewish person believes, or what, whatever that faith may be. And simply because of something they've heard here or there, or an assumption that they may have had. But if you've experienced it and you've heard it from others, you can help people to understand. And it's valuable to be an educated person and not just assume things about people. If you really want to understand them, if you want to build community, if you want to build relationships, and the basis even for building community and peace building is really understanding people as they understand themselves, and not as you want to understand them. The other really important aspect that was mentioned, I think, several times is, just like they say that the best way to learn something is to teach it. The best way really to understand your own beliefs is when you have to explain it to others, and when other people ask you questions, or maybe even challenge. When you get to know each other well enough, they'll challenge your understanding of something, and then you'll realize, well, wait a minute, maybe I've kind of grown up with this idea and I don't understand it myself. Let me go research this in order to understand it myself. And if you can't, once you understand it yourself, you really are able and in a better place to be able to explain it to others. And so over the course of decades of interfaith relations, I felt that my understanding of my own faith has expanded and become really solid, because I've had to really take on the questions and have to internalize and understand it in a way that it makes sense to me, so that I can explain it to others. Let me go to Andrew.
Yeah, I thought it had to be me. We're kind of running out of candidates to choose there, huh? Well, you've all said it so well. I don't know what I can add. I just want to say, like, ditto, likewise to what everybody else said. But I mean, I guess if I had to break it down into like three reasons why it's important to know the religious other or learn about the religious other, in my view, the first one would be that, I mean, look, it's hard to narrow down what are the most significant problem facing humanity. There are lots of candidates for that. But one answer that's reasonable is, I would say, is what the thinker Oliver O'Donovan calls an antagonistic praxis. So this is a sense of unmediated dispute with the other, and a kind of zero-sum game where in order for me to win, you have to lose, and in order for my group to win, your group has to lose, and we're rivals that are in conflict. And I think that it's a very thorny question how you get away from a mentality like that. But I think one way that can happen is through a rehumanizing of the other. That takes place through encounter. And through that encounter with an actual human being that you're meeting, not as preconceived categories in your own mind, but as they truly are, which is actually difficult to do, as it turns out, to actually try to know and understand another person how they know and understand themselves. It's not just their religious doctrines, but it's the values and meaning that they individually assign to those doctrines. I think that it's not outlandish to think that kind of an encounter is an integral component of working towards not only more individual solidarity on a small scale level, but also a transformative praxis that is aimed at the common good and tries to work us out of this kind of mess we've gotten into where everyone seems to be in a, again, antagonistic stance towards one another. So that would be the first reason that I would give. The second reason I would give, I think, is I quote the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas, who said that our moral obligations begin with the face of the other. So the other is the basis for our own to know ourselves, as Irfan said, Dr. Omar said, but also the other is the source of my religious and moral obligations. My religious and moral obligations are to that person, or in the Christian tradition, to my neighbor. And so without knowing the other or attempting to encounter the other, I can't fulfill my religious and moral obligations. Those aren't fulfilled in a vacuum of isolation or through a relationship I have with an idea of someone in my own head. It's through the concrete reality of the other in their totality. And the third and final reason I give is because it's fun. It's fun to try and really get to know somebody. I mean, truly try to get to know and understand somebody. So often, instead of doing that, as has been said before, human beings encounter another person through categories in their own mind, which isn't really encountering them. You can call it something else. It's labeling them, it's viewing them through the prism of yourself. But really getting to know another person, especially a person who thinks very differently from you, is an adventure, and it's exciting, and you yourself benefit as a result. So those are the three that I would give if I had to sum it up in 3 minutes. And I'm keeping to my time limit, Rhonda, because I don't want to get in trouble. So back to you.
Well, Andrew, you kind of spent it already, but because everyone else was paying attention to that time, we're great. I could let you do that. It's okay. And plus you had great 3 points. So thank you all. I really appreciate what I heard, and I'm really resonating with your story, Fatima, of your name and just how much names mean to all of us, and to see how your name goes across culture, across religion, and being able to talk with other people. I just think that's a great example. So I believe everyone has shared. And we're to the second round, or our middle part of the presentation, where each person perhaps may not get to each person, but each person has been asked to prepare a question to share with the panelists. As they share the question can be directed to a person or a group. So students can direct their questions to the community religious / academic leaders, and or the community leaders, academics can also pose specific questions to the students, or someone could just ask a specific person a question. So Pardeep could ask Claire a specific question, or Fatima could ask Janan a specific question. So I'm so excited to hear the questions and how this portion is going to go. Again, you can ask a question and it's just out there, and anybody can chime in and answer that question. And so if you're not asking a specific question to a specific person, I will allow space for at least 2 people to respond to that question if it's just a general question. Is that clear and that makes sense to everybody? I like those reaction buttons at the bottom, so you can just give me a thumbs up. We're all tracking. Okay, great. Everybody is picking up what I'm putting down. Okay, so I hope you two in our audience, you're watching and you're listening and things are stirring inside of you. Please remember, post your questions and we would love to try to get to those as well. So to kick us off with our first question, if I don't have a volunteer, do I have any volunteers?
I can go.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Lauren.
Okay, this is actually a general question. I think anyone can answer it, but I was wondering if, do you think that schools are doing a good job at raising awareness of interfaith dialogue and the religious other? And if not, why do you think this is the case? And what can schools do to make this a more widespread movement?
Wow, that's a fantastic question. I'm going to ask you to repeat that question again. I'll say it twice. Okay. And then when you respond, the rules are the same. Try to keep your answers to 2 to 3 minutes. But please repeat that question again. That's a great question.
Okay. Do you think that schools are doing a good job of raising awareness of interfaith dialogue and the religious other? And if not, why do you think this is the case? And what can schools do to make this a more widespread movement?
I'm going to jump in there. Because I do deal with schools. I think that I have definitely over the past few decades seen a big difference in the way schools address these issues. I think that some of the city schools, for example, or schools where, I should say schools where there tends to be more diversity, I think that there's a more understanding and more openness and more accommodations. I think that some areas that doesn't have that kind of diversity, teachers are probably still hesitant to even address the issue of religion, because we've encountered that where teaching about religion has been kind of turned by some families and some individuals as teaching religion, as if you are proselytizing. Even trying to understand, I remember going to some schools where, there was, for example, misinformation, and I was invited to go in to speak. And then there was a big hoopla from some of the parents about the idea, are we now allowing the Muslims to come in and teach our children and proselytize to them? And so, in some quarters, ignorance is bliss, and it just makes more sense to not know about a community rather than try and learn about them and educate their children, which is really unfortunate, especially in the kind of global society that we live in, where people, travel for work, they work with diverse groups of people, and I think it's going to affect their children in the long run, especially if they go to particular universities. So I think, it depends on the school, and I think that all we can do is continue to try and help these schools and teachers to understand that teaching about religion just simply expands the opportunities for your children and expands their horizons. And this does not equate to teaching religion.
Yeah, that's a great.
Go ahead, Party. I'll go after you.
Oh, Caitlin, I'll keep it. Yeah, I think a lot of schools and institutions are somewhere on the spectrum of thinking about whether they're like completely interfaith inclusive to not even having any intentional dialogue at all or conversations or any of that. And so I think that schools are getting better at doing this work, understanding that this is a very immersive sort of experience of people's lives that they need to address. But I think that there's been a fear around not being able to talk about the sensitivity of the role that faith plays and interfaith plays within student life. So there's this hesitancy, and I would say, like, for the largest part, most of the institutions that exist in the United States have some form of Christian backing to it, and so it's I don't know if there's a lot of Sikh schools out there. I don't know if there's a lot of Buddhist schools out there. So I think that you largely see one of the three Abrahamic faiths having their schools. And so I just think as we kind of go forward, to have some more courage to encourage that as well. I think we're kind of getting there. But again, like institutions, policies, all of those things, if you're not intentionally doing it, you're not going to accidentally do it.
Yeah, that's a great kind of lead into what I was going to say, both dovetailing off of both speakers that have just gone. I think that one of the challenges when it comes to interfaith progress in schools, and I can speak to more of the college experience at universities from some of the research I did for the Interfaith Engagement in Milwaukee book. One of the challenges is that it depends on people. I mean, that seems so simple, but it really does depend on an intentional effort by students, faculty, and staff at the university. As Pradeep said, it doesn't happen just by accident. Certainly there's interfaith engagement happening always. It's a constant occurring thing when you're just living and breathing in normal life, but to actually have intentional movements and curriculum and more experiential experiences outside of the classroom, that requires an intentional effort by people. And I think that a big challenge on college campuses is that students often are very transient. They come and go, and faculty and staff are important stakeholders in the university, but universities are also tailored towards student learning. So the student perspective is really important and it's really powerful at universities. So I think one of the ways in which a culture of dialogue can be created at universities is having, when they are able, students, faculty, and staff to come together to look at university mission statements and see where interfaith engagement fits into that, how the mission statement speaks to the learning. Most universities, I'd say, speak to the learning and growing of students and getting to know oneself and the other through conversations about faith and other things that make us diverse, other factors, is easily an element of the mission statement that you can support. So creating a culture by utilizing the mission statements, I think, is a way to move forward with that, and hopefully can then surpass the challenge of the transient nature of students to hopefully continue on as more students come in.
Thank you, Lauren. That was a great question. You got people engaged in that one right away. Can we have another question, please?
I'll hop in just because mine relates to students. I was wondering if one of the religious or community leaders could speak to what are the best ways for students or academic partners to partner with you, to reach out to the community, to reach out to other religious institutions, to maybe set up interfaith experiences and to create opportunities for interfaith growth and learning together. I'll repeat it one more time too, because I know we're doing it twice. So wondering if any of the religious or community leaders can speak to what the best way for a student or academic partner, what the best way is for them to reach out to you to partner and create interfaith experiences.
So just really quickly, you can reach out to interfaithconference.org. You could hit us up on Facebook. We can message. We can, you can be involved in the interfaith dinner dialogue programs when those are happening at post-COVID, once they can resume. We have other programming around interfaith earth, eco-justice, Peace and International Issues Committee. Janan is the chair of the Committee for Interfaith Understanding. So you could definitely contact Janan. And she, again, she's a pioneer in the work of interfaith in the community. So I think there's plenty of ways that we can get involved. We are hoping that in a few years, there's going to be an interfaith intentional sort of house that's built for maybe those that are going to go into the field of mental health, nursing, other fields to maybe live together in the space, understand that and take that out. There's lots of programming that are happening at different corporations. ERGs, employee resource groups, are starting to understand. Again, there was a lot of hesitancy around this, and then going to a place, Rockwell Automation is pioneering that, where they have an interfaith ERG group set up to teach you about interfaith experience within the workplace life. So this is something that I think is becoming much more common. And so I think faith inclusion is something that we definitely need to talk about going forward. You guys can help set up a
community leader there. One more community leader speak to that question.
Well, I'll jump in. Yeah, as Pardeep had mentioned, there's of course the Interfaith Conference and the Committee for Interfaith Relations, or for Interfaith Understanding that I lead. You can also contact the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition. We have a variety of forums, including book clubs, where we discuss books. We're reading books related to understanding Islam, but 95% of the members are not Muslim. And we have networking brunches. We have a variety of different events. I do have to say that during COVID, those have been lessened a bit, but we still do films and discussions and a variety of different activities. And we're hoping as hopefully the pandemic starts to, at least the numbers start to decrease, that we can go back to having some of our more robust programming. But definitely contact us, and we have a youth group as well. So for those that want to get involved as younger individuals.
Janan, we could possibly do some interfaith TikToks.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of interfaith marriages happening and all kinds of stuff. We have a good old time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you, Caitlin, for that question. All right, who's next with their question?
I'd actually like to jump in and ask, especially some of the younger student participants, what have you found as most difficult navigating, when you're trying to do interfaith work or working in interfaith with your peers? What are some of the challenges you've encountered?
I can go. I think when I talk to people about engaging in interfaith, a lot of students are reluctant because they think they need to know everything about either their own religion or about others to engage in interfaith dialogue. And they're also very hesitant to know how to talk or how to speak or the right thing to say, or they're worried about they might end up offending someone unknowingly. And that's why I think interfaith dialogue is important, because you get to know about the other person and you get to know about what is important to them. So I think, yeah, that was one of the biggest thing I hear a lot from students.
Okay, would another student like to ask that question, answer that question that Janan posed?
I can kind of touch on it too. I know what I found, or like at least in the times that I've kind of tried to talk about interfaith, or like places where I've kind of found trouble, is I feel like there's a lot of educating you have to do. And I identify as Catholic, and even though this campus is a majority Christian, if they are practicing anything, even then understanding Catholicism and Christianity from maybe a different perspective. I know, like, as somebody who is indigenous and like who has kind of dealt with has dealt with problems with other Catholic people, where it's really especially 2 years ago, it really tanked my faith and stuff, learning how to be Catholic, but also recognizing that there's sometimes times where you might disagree on things because of interpretation, and also recognizing again, like I've said again, like from our class, learning that there's different ways to do things. And I definitely realized this when I started going to the Indigenous church here in Milwaukee. And it was like the first time in 2 years that I felt safe in church for a long time. And for me, that was really important. It's even going to make me tear up right now. It was such a good experience, and I'm really glad to be able to have that, because I think there's different ways to be able to approach the same faith. So even just like within one's own religion, trying to find ways to feel safe, and also because I think once you kind of get that experience of, oh my gosh, I didn't feel comfortable with this happening, or I didn't feel great about how somebody said that, or something along that lines. Like, once I think you kind of learn that, I think that makes like relationships and even just understanding people outside of your faith even more important and special.
Wow, thank you for sharing your own story. That's beautiful. Thank you. Let's have another question. I think we got time for another question.
I kind of like to ask the students as well, over this past 2.5 years, or 2 years since March of 2020, COVID, and seeing everything that's happened during that time, that summer of 2020, attacks on the API community, attacks against other people, how, like, just the personal struggles that you all are dealing with, having to learn remotely, or sometimes having classes, having to wear masks. There seems to be this like sort of disconnect that's happened. And faith is kind of all about connecting to oneself. We talked about it, connecting to other folks. How has your faith, I don't mean to be presumptuous, strengthened over the past some years?
I can talk. So talking from a Muslim perspective, I think it is to strengthen like one's faith, there you need to spend time, like solitude is important, for meditation and for reflection. But I think a lot of Muslims over here especially kind of bond a lot by going to the masjid, or learn more by going to the masjid. So I think like with me too, personally, like I moved here in 2018, and then the pandemic hit like end of 2019 or beginning of 2020. So it was really hard, because I didn't even know a lot about what Muslims in Milwaukee did, and I was just starting to, see that, and then the COVID hit. So it was really like a isolating time for me.
Another student want to answer?
I can share next. I think what's interesting for me, so I took the Christian Muslim dialogue course during the semester that we switched remotely. And it was interesting because I was kind of shocked that that was the first experience that I had where there was such an importance on interfaith dialogue and talking with people about their faiths. Growing up, I went to a public school, and so I barely talked about my faith, and I feel like I didn't really know what my faith meant to me until like right when the pandemic hit. And so I think during that time period, I've had a lot of time to be more self-reflective, like Fatima mentioned. She said in the Muslim faith, it's very like self-reflection and solitude is very important. And being able to like lean into that, I know in prayer, I'm also a practicing Catholic, and like prayer is very intentional and can be more personal or devoted towards God. And kind of what that meant to me has changed over the years. I feel like my faith is more personal than it is institutional, because I know there are some things that the Catholic faith has been like publishing as an institution. I've been trying to grapple with myself because I don't necessarily agree with everything. And so then I think it's been interesting to kind of think like, okay, what does that mean for me? How can I still engage in my faith even though I don't agree with everything? And kind of, I've been using a lot of different relationships to understand what that means to me, and also what other faiths and practices people. Yeah, so I'd say it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, but I think the world is like that right now too for everyone.
Thank you for sharing. And to wrap up this segment, I would like to have one final question posed from one of the students, and then we'll transition to our last scheduled question. So if one of the students could share their question, that would be great.
I can share my question. This can be to everyone, and kind of in our varying experiences with interfaith dialogue as well. How have you seen your personal faith strengthen during your time in interfaith dialogue, as well as maybe if you've seen a light bulb moment in someone else's conversation too?
Yeah, I could speak to that if Rhonda would allow me. You know, I always thought of interfaith as a modality of engaging the difference. So that's a very sort of cold description of interfaith dialogue, you know, as a modality of looking at the difference. But then there's a warm side to it, you know, the faith experience, the solidarity that Dr. Kim spoke about, and you know, the humanizing of the other, and you know, dinner dialogues, you know, having a table fellowship with someone. And so there is a kind of a dialectic between these two. And so before the pandemic, I think I was more on the side of understanding, reflecting, learning about the other as a person, and negotiating the difference. But I think during the pandemic, I realized, you know, sitting together and having tea and coffee is so important part of that negotiating the difference, that it dawned on me that there is a greater balance that is needed in between these two sides in an interfaith activity. So I think that was my realization during the pandemic. Also, I wanted to mention that Pew Research Center has done a little study that I can't tell you exactly when, but the summary of that was that most Americans saw the pandemic as a crisis that human beings could have avoided. And so they weren't blaming God necessarily in terms of, you know, if they have faith, they were thinking, you know, this is not something that God has done for us. This is something that human beings could have avoided. So their faith is not shaken. And that was very interesting. That's, you know, also I could relate to that finding of the Pew Research Center. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Omar. And we have questions rolling in now. So I want to be mindful of that and create and allow space for folks that have been watching this and engaging along with us. Jorge, would you like to share one or two of the questions that you have that are rolling in now?
So Beth Mulholland says on YouTube, I am a Unitarian Universalist, graduate student studying religions and hoping to do interfaith work. And I am wondering how best to connect with my local community and across the US.
So the Unitarian Universalists are an interfaith judicatory. And so, I mean, there's 3 Unitarian locations. They do not want to be known as churches. They want to be known as Unitarian locations, and really they're very, very embracing of interfaith dialogue, relationship, and even spiritual teachings, faith teachings, theological teachings. You could go to the nearest one that is close to you. There's one in the North Shore. There's one downtown, and then there's one in Brookfield. So definitely all 3 of the reverends that are at the different locations could help you tap into interfaith activities and lots of different services that are happening that are interfaith based.
Thank you, Pardeep.
Any
One more
other
question?
responses? Should we move on to the next question?
Let's move on.
Okay,
Maybe
so
I just want to say a couple of things about that. I think Pardeep has, Pardeep has said something that is very important. So there is an institutional setup for interfaith dialogue, and people, if they feel comfortable relating through that institution, that I think works perfectly. But also, within universities now, either through campus ministry or through student organizations, there is a interest in engaging the other on the basis of faith experience. I know there are cultural organizations, there are ethnic organizations. So that might be also another way, if a person is in a university setting, to explore what is a possibility there, and start a new group. Like Claire, that is member of the panel here, and Fatima, both of them are part of a group that is taking, is reality at Marquette, a student group that is focused on issues of conflict, culture, and interfaith. So, these initiatives can be very beneficial for students and very destabilizing for the administration, because they cannot control the discourse. Once the students initiate these kind of things, then they can basically take it in whatever direction they want. So just wanted to put my 2 cents in.
Yeah, that's great. Power to the students. Destabilize. That's right. Okay, what's our next question?
So Joe Rosales, says, how can Marquette implement interfaith dialogue with classes outside of the theology or peace studies departments? And how will Marquette University student body gain this much needed perspective?
I'll jump in. This is a really great question. So I went to Marquette, graduated in 2017. So I'm interested in new perspectives from the current students, but I was a nursing student. So I double majored with nursing and theology. So I can speak to kind of the classes I took outside of the theology department that touched on religion and spirituality. Luckily, nursing lends itself pretty easily to these conversations when it comes to holistic patient care. That is a major element that comes up, understanding one's religiosity and spirituality when we're caring for them. So there were courses that we took. One was about like the foundations in nursing, being viewing nursing through the Ignatian pedagogy. And that allowed us to have more in-depth and kind of structured conversation around how does spirituality inform nursing care? How does your nursing care intersect with spirituality? So there was some more freedom to explore those questions. So I would just say, like, encouraging reaching out to like program advisors, or even touching base with professors if you're in a course that you feel like is suitable to bring up these religious components and in the discussion, whether that's informing your whatever your practice might be, if that's a nursing practice, or, you know, if you're in a math class and want to understand the ways in which religion informs math, like the intersections with religiosity and spirituality are pretty abundant. And I'm thinking like environmental programs as well. There's a lot, I've seen classes across different universities that look at environmentalism and spirituality. So there's definitely a lot of room to explore and navigate. So just encourage you to, if you don't have a current class that allows that, speaking to your program director, your professor, to see if there are ways in which that can be incorporated.
Just if I could add to that really quickly, Rhonda, yeah, I completely agree with what Caitlin is saying. And on an institutional level, I mean, we really have in place the kind of curricular design to implement interfaith dialogue. I'm just going to read really, really quickly a couple of our learning outcomes for our core curriculum at Marquette. And it's like our learning outcomes: responsible and ethical communicators, moral and ethical actors, citizens with purpose, collaborators promoting equity and justice across cultural contexts, global problem solvers. So we have the kind of the goalpost set right, I think. And then it's a matter of us as professors in collaborating with our students in integrating interfaith into those outcomes, which makes a lot of sense how you could do that, huh? So
if I can, I'm sorry.
Oh, good.
Go ahead.
Did you want to go Pardeep? Oh, okay. Just real quick, I wanted to also mention that whereas it's valuable to have it coming from the institution itself, but I think that there's a lot to be said about the students themselves and student organizations organizing it. I think that sometimes when it's within a particular curriculum, there are limitations to how that might be implemented. But I think that if you allow the students themselves to have big events, around certain specific issues and bring in representatives of different faith communities and have maybe, great big meals together and or do projects together where you interact with each other, there's going to be a flexibility and really an ability to interact at a level that sometimes, even within an institution or institutional programming doesn't necessarily allow. And Claire says samosas. I am all for samosas. Yes. Falafel and samosas.
I may need a salad, but just kidding. I think that the importance is so needed. We're seeing an uptick in just religious-based violence, and I think that some of that is to do to not having understanding, and even within the church and people that are coming in. So I think one of the subspecialties that I was thinking about while Caitlin was going was counseling, and how much is not addressed into somebody thinking that their religion allows for them to even look at somebody with anything less than the intention of love. And so I think that more and more of that is needed within the dynamics of the United States, to say how do we make this accessible, where now the language is not about rejection, but about the appreciation and love that we have for one. And I wonder how many people are even, as we see people turning away from even the church or the masjid or the gurdwara, and we see kids is turning away from that and going towards kind of thinking about inclusion, but not intentionally thinking about faith inclusion, and how much that could be just kind of not like an intent, like kind of a barrier to them really going into and delving into their own personal faith.
Wow, thank you, everyone. That was a good question. Got us all stirred up. All right, we have one more question from Jorge, and then we'll get into our final question for the panel this evening.
So Sarah Aaron says, do you have any suggestions for individual students who might want to start engaging in interfaith dialogue in their personal lives? Are there better or worse ways to go about it?
Could I have some stuff to say on this as somebody who is also a student too. I think that, first of all, I think that's a really good question. But secondly, I think the biggest way you can be able to kind of be better or even start talking interfaith is just by doing it, by seeking out those opportunities and also having the right intentions when you come into a conversation with somebody who might be different than you. So not thinking about like, oh, like, what can I take, or like, you can also think about that, like what you can take away from the conversation, but also genuinely, because people can know when you're genuine or not, or inauthentic. So if you come into the conversation with anybody, it could be something, it doesn't have to be a very big question. It's just getting to know a person. So being genuine and genuinely wanting to get to know that person and what they're about and what they believe in, what they care about. I think that's the best thing you can do. And that's what I've learned here at Marquette, and making friendships with people who have been different than me, just being there and just being a friend, basically.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I like that. It's coming in it without your own agenda, but open.
There's some.
What are you going to share?
Yeah, there's some amazing books on just interfaith, just interfaith. You know, Holy Envy by Barbara Brown Taylor was an amazing book that I kind of read. You know, Living Buddha, Living Christ. Those are all amazing books. So there's ways that you can learn about people's different faiths and how it enriches your own faith, and how it deepens your faith. So I think that some of that is like doing some pre-education before you may show up to something, to kind of know some of the etiquette, some ways to be respectful.
Thank you for that, Party. Now we get to our final question. You all have made this first hour go by so quickly. I hate to see that we're almost done. We have 20 minutes or a little bit less than 20 minutes left to go. So I hope that our audience watching this is really getting something from the wisdom and openness that's being shared here. And so we want to keep thinking about what we can do to advance interfaith dialogue. And I know this is especially a passionate topic for you, Dr. Omar. And so I'm going to give you the space to talk to this question and to answer it first, because I know you were so passionate about it. With this last question, we really want to talk about how we advance the conversation about interfaith in Milwaukee. What ways can we really begin to engage those members of our own religious communities that are reluctant to being a part of interfaith? So Dr. Omar, I'll let you go first with that, and you talk a little bit about why this is so passionate to you. And I'll just give you the floor to go a little bit deeper with that. But others of you can think about, well, what can we do to engage those reluctant people that we may be worshiping with week after week or in community with, that seems to be a little bit stuck or resistant, or still full of questions and not quite seeming ready to have the deeper conversations about interfaith dialogue. Dr. Omar?
Yeah, thank you, Rhonda. So as just remember what Claire said, faith is a very unique experience. You know, it's not like race, or it's not like culture, or linguistic difference. It's a difference that is difficult to fathom and difficult to bridge for some. And, the first thing is that we know that interfaith is very powerful and very widespread in Milwaukee area, and it goes back, years, at least 50 years. But the question is that we always get these usual suspects, so to speak. They're the same people who are engaged in interfaith, the same people who promote interfaith, but there are large parts of the communities, whether it's Jewish or Hindu or Muslim or Christian, that is sort of, aloof, basically, or either not interested or not aware. And I think they are aware, but probably not as interested or as convinced. And, this is a serious matter because, life is short. I mean, we can't wait another 50 years for them to become interested. If these young students here, sitting here, are aware of its importance, we need to have that, led from within the communities. So one of the reasons I wanted to address this question is that because messaging is important from the top, whether it's our religious community or whether it's our institution. In this case, I'm part of Marquette. I'm interested in messages coming from the top that speak to the relevance and importance and imperative of engaging and understanding the importance of dialogue. And this has not happened to the degree that I think, certainly I can speak for my own religious community here in Milwaukee. We have wonderful people like Janan Najib and a number of others I could name. But then there are others who are, on the sidelines or silent. And I think they all need to speak so that the weight of their authority, the weight of their credibility can filter down to other people in the community. And so that's my concern. And I don't know how to achieve that, except that I keep, speaking about it at every opportunity I get. So I'll stop there and I'll let, Pradeep and Janan, and I also like to hear from, Rhonda, because, what do you think? How can we, pull these big parts of the chunks of the community in, so I'll let you guys speak.
Well, today, Pardeep and I were talking about the Christian community and some of the reluctance there. Now, obviously, I'm not speaking for all Christians, right? But I do understand that there is, tends to be something synonymous with Christianity and American. So people tend to think what it means to be American means it means to be Christian too. And I think for a lot of Christians, they get stuck there. So if I'm Christian, I'm American, and I have to stay loyal to this American ideology. Does this make me less patriotic if I accept, or if I choose to listen to or engage or entertain other religious perspectives and ideas that are not in line with Christianity / American thought, which that's a whole issue in itself. And I don't want to go longer than my own 3 minutes because I could on that. But I will say, I think we have to, it's being honest about some of those things. And for me, it's asking questions, being able to ask those people within my own community questions. Well, what are you thinking? What is the fear? A lot of times you can get at that and you understand there's some fear there. And most times I think people feel like they're betraying something. And I don't think it's clear in people's consciousness what I'm saying, that they're automatically equating their patriotism with being Christian and such. I don't think that's clear for everybody. But that is part of some unconsciousness that's happening there. And so it is being able to sit with people and their fears and get at those questions and find ways to make them feel safe and heard, and to know that it's not a betrayal to actually listen or have dinner or engage in some religious learning with someone who's different. But I think that that's probably a big part of it. Is like, am I betraying my own culture? Am I betraying my own people? And sometimes people might even think, well, I might even be betraying God if I choose to engage. And so it's a big one. It's heavy. And I think we do have to raise the question. And so thank you for raising the question.
Pardon me, just go ahead. This time you can go.
Oh, God. So Claire, you brought up something, and I was just thinking about it while Rhonda went, and I was just thinking about just the unique experience of America and the history of America, and thinking about all of our faiths. And I know that within sometimes there's a lot of criticism that's given to the Christian community, but I think the Christian community in America is very much shaped by colonialism, and really, really shaped by white supremacy. And until we understand the effects that has had on the faith itself, and we take that apart, I don't think we can get to, the version of Christianity that is about love. We're believing in that is about dominance. And I think that that's not unique just to the Christian community. That's also the Muslim community. That is also our own Sikh community. Because oftentimes I get the question of like, well, Pardeep, are you even a Sikh? And are you a practicing Sikh? Are you a traditional Sikh? Are you, and I let people know Sikhi is deeper than a turban. Sikhi is deeper than and for me, it's again, like coming back to that sense of process, is to say, when I came here, I saw my mom and dad struggle to make it. And they wanted to do the same as everyone else did. And I find myself in this season of my life saying, I don't want that anymore. I want to reclaim what is Sikhi. And I want my children to reclaim it too. And I want them to go forward with the best of what it was meant to be, not the best of what it can be because you're trying to dominate somebody else or be over, or like better than somebody else. But understand, in Dr. King's, when he talks about mutuality, is to say we are all tied to the single garment of destiny, whether we like it or not. And I think that takes intent, like kind of coming back and saying, let's address this and let's pick this apart from what it is. And Claire, you talked about it as an institution, right? And a personal belief. And I think that we even need to say, if my personal belief takes me into this institution, I better do whatever I can in this institution to make sure that I'm taking that apart too. And so you got a responsibility. So I think that is what I kind of think that the work is as we go forward, to kind of freeing our institutions of what they, like the faith and hijacking the faith.
Thanks, Pardeep. You hit on a few of the issues. It's not an easy thing, as was mentioned. A lot of, at least I can speak on behalf of the Muslim community. We have a significant number of immigrants that are coming from countries of colonialist rule, and coming from countries where missionaries had a very, very strong part, where people's misery were sort of used as an opportunity to have a bowl of soup in one hand and a Bible in another hand. And this is their experiences, and it's not such a long ago experience. It in fact continues to go on. In fact, in Fort McCoy, we have all of these Afghan refugees who are Muslim, and they just recently have gotten the last of them out. But one of the groups that was brought in by the State Department to work by the, and I'm trying to remember what the church organization is, but that were brought in to work with these Muslim refugees was Samaritan's Purse. So for those of you that don't know, this was run by Franklin Graham, one of the most Islamophobic an anti-Muslim proselytizer missionary there is functioning in the world. And in fact, immediately it was all over Facebook, etc., where their members were saying that, God opened up an opportunity for us to convert them and have these individuals find Christ. And so when you have these kind of experiences, even at this time in the United States, how are you going to convince your community that see this happening, that interfaith dialogue is a good thing? And so there's a couple of points I want to make that at least I can say from the Muslim community perspective, because I have for decades been trying to work on this, is that particularly among immigrants, many of them believe that interfaith dialogue, really the purpose is to proselytize and try to convert us. There's also the second concern is the idea of the fear of, and I think this was mentioned, of not being an educated respondent. That maybe they're going to be talking at a whole different level and I'm not really there, or English might be a barrier and they feel that they can't really explain things in a particular way. There's also the idea that the belief that, well, you know what? The Quran talks about Christians and Jews and respecting them, and we believe in their prophets and we believe in their revelation. So we really know everything we need to know about them. So if they want to learn about us, great, but we know everything we need to know about them. And so again, this concept of trying to educate them, well, that's not enough. You need to really, work with people. This is about building community. And so from my perspective, I see the way to engage people is, first of all, to stop all of this craziness with groups like Samaritan's Purse and have Christians themselves stand up against it, in order to convince people that interfaith dialogue is not about proselytizing. But from the Muslim perspective, it's really about highlighting the Muslim understanding that about building community and coming to a common word, which is the coming to the concept of belief in God and working with other communities. And so highlighting that this is really a part of faith. It's not an option.
That was a hot question as well. And we could have started with that too, I guess. But I think we all recognize that we all have a lot more work to do in terms of that beginning question. Why do we find it beneficial or important to learn about the religious other? And so we know we got hurdles to overcome, and we still have a lot more of our own messaging to put out there. So party, get those TikToks ready. But as we wrap up, I want to allow a space for Claire to make an announcement, and then we will turn it over to Miss Caitlin and Dr. Omar to have the final words, as they were the ones to craft and bring together this opportunity for us to do this series. So thank you all for this time together and inviting me to help guide some of our time. Thanks much. Claire, there you have it.
Thank you so much. I'll keep this brief. But like was mentioned earlier, Fatima, who's on the call, and myself, if this at all inspired you to get involved in like an interfaith and culture conversation, something that's pretty soon, this Thursday, this Culture Conflict Interfaith, CCI, is hosting an event. It's on Marquette's campus in Marquette Hall, where we are talking about love and how love is expressed through our cultures and through our faiths in different ways. And I mentioned when Janan mentioned sharing a meal, we will be having samosas. So they are a good way to bring community, share delicious and warm food. But it's just one way that we made an informal student-led group to have these conversations in not necessarily a classroom space, even if it's physically in a classroom, but being able to converse with one another, build friendships without the homework and everything too. And eat too, Pardeep said. But then Caitlin and Dr. Omar, the floor.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire. Just to, kind of bring us to a wrap here this evening. I've been taking notes kind of as we've been going here. And I think one of the major themes that we've seen about the value of knowing and learning about the religious other continues to come back to seeking to know a person as they want to be known, seeking to know a person as they know themselves, and then as well as knowing the other in order to know yourself. And I think those are really common themes that we continue to see in interfaith dialogue. And I am grateful for these opportunities such as this, and for the participants that are listening in. This is just an amazing thing that we're all able to come together and take that effort, take that initiative to create spaces like this. So I will just highlight that I think it does carry on the original founders that we do talk about in the book, Interfaith Engagement in Milwaukee. They have been instrumental in creating this initial the richness that we see in Milwaukee now. Dr. Hamdani, Sister Reese, and Sister Walsh have all been I think honored in this space and would be proud to see the evolutions of the work that they began in Milwaukee. So I'll pass it to Dr. Irfan Omar for the final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. I think you're right. They would be proud of us, and they're looking down on us from where they are. I just wanted to thank the students first for joining this panel. I know it's not easy. You guys are busy, you have courses, you have work to do, and this is just an extra responsibility. I'm deeply appreciative of that. I want to thank our community leaders, Rhonda and Pardeep and Janan Najib. I mean, you have been here with us from the very beginning, and this is really, really a treat for anybody who is watching and who is listening. I know you guys speak a lot everywhere, but this is very important for us here and for this event. And I'm really grateful to Jorge and Dr. Kim. I mean, I'm technically challenged, so I don't know how this Zoom works, this YouTube works. So you guys have really done miracles, especially Dr. Kim for taking over, because when we applied for this grant, Dr. Kim was not at his current post. And so he had to sort of take over this charge, and you have done excellent. Thank you so much, Drew, for your leadership, and Rhonda for your leadership today. So I just want to say I learned a lot from this experience. So I thank all of you, and thank you, Caitlin, for being a collaborator and for causing all of this trouble. Thank you very much.